The moment I saw my daughter being taken into an ambulance, panic seized me, and I rushed to her side. Lying on the stretcher, she clutched my hand with shaking fingers and whispered, "Mom, please don't tell Dad." I didn't leave her, not for a single second, as we rode together to the hospital. The oscillating frequency of the siren was the only sound in the universe that seemed to penetrate the sudden, suffocating vacuum of my reality at exactly 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday in mid-November. I had arrived at our driveway in the quiet, manicured enclave of Greenwich, Connecticut, expecting to find the house empty, as my 16-year-old daughter, Maya, was supposed to be at her AP History study group. Instead, I found the front door of our $3.2 million colonial estate wide open and a white ambulance parked at an angle on the gravel, its lights casting a chaotic, rhythmic red glare against the gray afternoon sky. I abandoned my car, a sensible Volvo SUV that Richard insisted I drive for safety, and ran toward the stretcher that two paramedics were wheeling out of the foyer. On it lay Maya. She was pale, her skin the color of old parchment, and there was a cervical collar wrapped around her neck. Her left arm was splinted, and a line of blood, stark and terrifying, ran from her hairline to her ear. Panic, cold and absolute, seized my chest, making it difficult to draw breath, but I forced my legs to move, forcing myself into the role of the calm, competent mother I had been trained to be. "I'm her mother," I announced, my voice sounding thin and brittle against the mechanical wail of the engine. "I'm coming with her." The lead paramedic, a man with gray stubble and eyes that looked like they had seen 20 years of suburban tragedies, nodded once. "She's conscious, ma'am, but confused. We suspect a concussion and a radial fracture. We need to go now." I climbed into the back of the ambulance, the smell of antiseptic and diesel fuel assaulting my senses. I took Maya's hand, avoiding the IV line that had already been inserted into her delicate vein. Her fingers were ice cold. She opened her eyes, struggling to focus on my face, pupils dilated and uneven. "Maya," I whispered, squeezing her hand gently. "It's okay. Mom is here. We're going to the hospital." She blinked, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes, mixing with the dried blood. She pulled me closer, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so broken. "Mom," she rasped, her voice barely audible over the road noise. "Mom, please don't tell Dad." The request hit me harder than the sight of her injuries. It wasn't a plea for pain relief. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a plea for silence. "Don't tell Dad." My husband, Richard, the celebrated family law attorney, the man who was currently at his firm in Manhattan, billing clients $950 an hour to settle their domestic disputes, the man who had bought Maya a pony when she was 6 and a coding boot camp tuition when she was 14. Why would her first instinct in a moment of trauma be to hide it from him? "We won't worry about that now," I soothed, brushing the hair from her forehead, my mind racing. "Just rest." But she wouldn't let go. "No," she insisted, her breathing becoming ragged. "He'll be so angry. He told me not to go in there. Please, Mom. Promise." The heart monitor began to beep faster, a digital staccato mirroring my own rising pulse. "I promise," I lied. "I promise, Maya. Just breathe." I didn't leave her, not for a single second, as we rode together to the hospital. But in that cramped metal box, watching the city rush by through the small rear windows, the foundation of my life began to crack. Richard was a strict father. Yes, he was exacting. He demanded straight A's and perfect manners. But this fear was different. This was the fear of a subordinate facing a tyrant. This was the fear of a witness. When we arrived at the emergency room at 2:45 p.m., the chaos of triage took over. Doctors in blue scrubs swarmed the stretcher, shouting out vitals and orders for CT scans. I was pushed to the periphery, holding Maya's purse, which they had cut off her shoulder. I sat in the hard plastic chair of the waiting room, staring at the bag. It was a designer piece, a birthday gift from Richard last month. I opened it, looking for her insurance card, but instead, I found her phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. I didn't know the passcode. Maya was entitled to her privacy, but as I held it, a notification lit up the screen. It was a text message from Dad, sent at 1:55 p.m., 19 minutes before I arrived home. "If you say a word about the office, the tuition is gone. Do you understand?" I stared at the message, the white text on the black background burning itself into my retinas. The office. Richard had a home office, a sanctuary of mahogany and leather that was strictly off limits. He kept client files there, he said, sensitive material. I had never questioned it. I was the dutiful wife, the former archivist who now managed the household staff and the social calendar. I respected boundaries, but Maya had evidently crossed one, and now she was in a neck brace. A cold, steely resolve began to replace the panic in my gut. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was an investigator who had just found the first piece of evidence in a crime scene I didn't know existed. I didn't call Richard, not yet. I sat there, clutching the phone, and waited for the doctor. Dr. Evans, a trauma specialist with a tired face and a clipboard, came out 40 minutes later. "Mrs. Sterling?" he asked. "Maya is stable. The CT scan shows a mild concussion, no bleed. The arm is a clean break. But," he paused, looking at me with a searching expression, "the paramedic said she was found at the bottom of the stairs." "That's what it looked like," I said carefully. "I wasn't home." "Right, Doctor," Evans said, lowering his voice. "The pattern of bruising on her upper arm. It's inconsistent with a fall. It looks more like a grab mark. Fingers, large ones. I have to ask, is there any trouble at home?" I looked at this man, this stranger who was seeing the truth I had been blind to for years. I realized then that my naivety was a luxury I could no longer afford. "My husband is a lawyer," I said, my voice steady. "He is very powerful. If I say yes, and I am wrong, he will destroy us. If I say nothing, and I am right, he might kill her. So, doctor, I need you to document everything, every bruise, every mark. Take photos. And do not put anything in the official file yet that would trigger a notification to the primary policyholder, who is my husband. Can you do that?" "Doctor." Evans looked at me, assessing the shift in my demeanor from hysterical mother to calculating protector. He nodded. "I can delay the billing coding for 24 hours. After that, it's automatic." "24 hours is all I need," I said. I stood up. I had a day to dismantle a 20-year marriage. I had a day to find out what was in that office. And I had a day to make sure that when Richard finally found out, it would be too late for him to spin the narrative. I walked back into Maya's room. She was sedated now, sleeping fitfully. I kissed her forehead, took her phone, and walked out of the hospital. I got into a taxi. "Where to?" the driver asked. 4200 Oak Lane, I said. "Home." I was going back to the scene of the crime, and I was going to break into the sanctuary. The heavy oak door of 4200 Oak Lane swung open with a silence that felt conspiratorial, the well-oiled hinges betraying nothing of the violence that had occurred hours earlier. It was 3:18 p.m. The house was exactly as I had left it, frozen in a state of interrupted domesticity. A half-drunk cup of tea sat on the hallway console. A history textbook lay open on the stairs, and there, near the bottom step, was the stain, a dark, jagged smear of crimson against the pristine white marble of the foyer floor. It was my daughter's blood. My instinct, the instinct of the housekeeper, the wife, the protector of order, screamed at me to get a bucket and bleach, to scrub it away until the house was perfect again. But the investigator in me, the part of my brain that had been dormant since I left my job at the National Archives 15 years ago to become Mrs. Sterling, froze my hand. That wasn't a mess. It was evidence. I stepped over it, careful not to disturb the pattern, and walked straight to the library door at the end of the hall. Richard's office. The door was locked, of course. It was a solid mahogany slab reinforced with a steel core, fitted with a biometric keypad that Richard had installed 3 years ago, claiming it was for client confidentiality. I stood before it, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I didn't have his fingerprint. I didn't have the code, but I knew Richard. I knew he was a narcissist who believed he was the smartest man in every room. He wouldn't use a random number. He wouldn't use a birthday, because birthdays are shared things. He would use a number that celebrated his greatest triumph. I closed my eyes, thinking back to the dinner parties, the toasts, the endless stories he told, the case of the century, the Davenport divorce. He had won a $45 million settlement on the 14th of October 2018. The date was etched into our lives because he had missed my 40th birthday to be in court. I typed in 101418. The keypad beeped green. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The smell hit me first, a mix of expensive scotch, leather, and the lingering metallic scent of ozone from the server rack humming in the closet. The room was dark, the heavy velvet curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. I flipped the switch, illuminating the sanctuary I had been forbidden to enter for a decade. It looked like a normal law office, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive executive desk, a leather Chesterfield sofa. But I wasn't looking for normal. I was looking for the reason my daughter was in a neck brace. I walked to the desk. It was clear, terrifyingly so. No papers, no files, just a sleek monitor and a keyboard. I sat in his chair. It felt too big, too imposing, and woke the computer. Password protected. I tried the settlement date again. Incorrect. I tried Maya's birthday. Incorrect. I stopped. I looked around the room. Richard was analog in his paranoia. He didn't trust the cloud. He trusted paper. He trusted steel. My eyes landed on the built-in bookshelf behind the desk. On the third shelf, there was a row of vintage law encyclopedias. They were dusty, except for one. Volume 4. Civil Procedure. The spine was clean. I pulled it. It didn't come off the shelf. It hinged outward. Behind the false books was a wall safe. I didn't need the code for this one. I knew where he kept the emergency override key, because I was the one who had hidden it for him 5 years ago, when the mechanism jammed, taped behind the framed diploma from Harvard on the opposite wall. I walked over, lifted the frame, and there it was. The small brass key. My hands were shaking as I inserted it into the safe. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. I pulled the heavy door open. Inside, there were no client files. There were stacks of cash-strapped bundles of $100 bills that must have totaled at least $200,000. There were 3 passports, all with Richard's photo but different names. And there was a black ledger. I pulled it out and opened it. It wasn't a law ledger. It was a laundering log. Davenport settlement, $45M. Client payout, $32M. Retainer, $3M. Diversion, $10M. He wasn't just winning cases. He was skimming millions from the settlements before the money ever reached the clients, hiding the theft in shell companies and offshore trusts. He was stealing from the very women he was paid to protect. But then I saw it. On the bottom shelf of the safe, tucked behind the cash, was a small, black hard drive labeled Security Internal. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Richard had cameras, not just outside, but inside. In his office, I grabbed the drive. I grabbed the ledger. I grabbed one of the passports. I shoved them all into my tote bag. I was about to leave when I heard the front door open. The sound was unmistakable. The heavy thud of the latch latch, the beep of the alarm system being disarmed. Richard was home. It was 3:45 p.m. He wasn't supposed to be back until 7. He must have left the office the moment he got the text that the ambulance had been called. I was trapped. There was no other exit from the library. I heard his footsteps on the marble, heavy, hurried, angry footsteps. He wasn't running to check on his injured daughter. He was running to check on his office. He was running to the scene of the crime. I had seconds. I looked around frantically. The closet. It was shallow, filled with the server rack and his spare trial suits. I squeezed myself into the corner, behind a row of charcoal gray jackets, and pulled the door shut just as the library door opened. Through the slats of the closet door, I watched my husband enter. He looked manic. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled. He went straight to the safe. He saw the open door. He saw the empty shelf where the ledger and drive had been. The sound he made was primal, a low, guttural growl of pure rage. He slammed his fist onto the desk, shaking the monitor. "Who?" he hissed to himself. "Who was it?" He pulled out his phone. "It's me," he barked into the receiver. "The office is compromised. The drive is gone." "No, it wasn't the girl. She's in the hospital. It had to be." "Wait." He went silent. He turned slowly, looking around the room. His eyes scanned the bookshelves, the desk, and then stopped on the closet door. My breath caught in my throat. I gripped the hard drive so tightly the edges dug into my palm. If he found me now, with the evidence of his felonies in my bag, I wouldn't leave this room alive. He took a step toward the closet. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at it. "The hospital," he muttered. "She's awake." He paused, torn between hunting for the intruder and managing the victim. The narcissist in him won. He needed to silence the witness before she could talk to the police. He spun around and ran out of the room. I heard the front door slam. I heard his Porsche roar out of the driveway. I waited a full 2 minutes, counting the seconds in the dark, before I collapsed out of the closet. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I was done being afraid. I walked out of the office, stepping over the bloodstain one last time. I got into my car and drove, not to the hospital. Not yet. I drove to the local precinct. I walked up to the front desk at 4:15 p.m. Officer Miller, a man I knew from the annual policeman's ball, looked up. "Mrs. Sterling?" he asked, surprised. "Is everything okay?" "No, officer," I said, placing the tote bag on the counter. "I need to speak to a detective immediately. I have evidence of grand larceny, embezzlement, and—" I paused, my voice breaking for the first time, "and attempted murder of a minor." They brought me into an interrogation room. I laid it all out, the ledger, the passports, and then we plugged in the hard drive. The detective clicked on the file dated today, 1:45 p.m. We watched in silence. On the screen, Maya walked into the office. She looked terrified. She went to the desk, picking up a stack of cash Richard had left out. Richard entered the frame a second later. He didn't ask her what she was doing. He didn't yell. He lunged. He grabbed her by the throat, the grab mark Dr. Evans had seen, and threw her. She hit the edge of the desk, then stumbled back and fell through the open doorway, tumbling down the stairs. Richard didn't run after her. He walked to the door, looked down, and then calmly closed the office door. He went back to his desk, put the cash in the safe, and sat down to send a text message. The text message I had read on her phone. The detective stopped the video. His face was grim. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, "we need to go to the hospital, now." We rode in a squad car, lights and sirens cutting through the evening traffic. When we arrived at the hospital, it was 5:30 p.m. We walked into the trauma ward. I saw Richard through the glass walls of Maya's room. He was sitting by her bed, holding her uninjured hand, looking for all the world like the grieving, worried father. He was leaning in close, whispering something to her. Maya looked terrified, her eyes darting to the door. I pushed the door open. Richard looked up, his face arranging itself into a mask of relief. "Claire," he exclaimed, standing up. "Thank God you're here. I was just telling Maya how worried we were. It was a terrible accident." She slipped on the stairs. I walked past him and stood next to Maya. I took her hand from him. I felt her pulse fluttering like a trapped butterfly. "It wasn't an accident, Richard," I said, my voice filling the small room, bouncing off the sterile tiles, "and she didn't slip." Richard's smile faltered. His eyes flicked to the two uniformed officers standing behind me. "Claire, you're upset," he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous low register he used when he was losing control. "We shouldn't discuss this in front of the police. You're hysterical." "I'm not hysterical," I said. "I'm a witness. I watched the video, Richard. I watched you throw our daughter down the stairs like she was garbage because she saw your money." The color drained from his face. "Video?" he whispered. "The drive," I said. "The one you were looking for in the closet. I gave it to them, along with the ledger and the passports." Richard lunged. It was a desperate, animalistic move. He reached for me, perhaps to hurt me, perhaps to silence me, but the officers were faster. They tackled him to the linoleum floor before he could touch me. As they cuffed his hands behind his back, the same hands that had bruised my daughter's neck, he screamed. He didn't scream that he was innocent. He screamed, "You stupid bitch! You ruined everything. Do you know how much that account was worth?" I stood over him, holding Maya's hand. "I know exactly what it was worth," I said. "It was worth 20 years, and you just spent it all." The aftermath was a blur of legal proceedings and media frenzy. The Sterling scandal dominated the headlines for months. Richard was denied bail, labeled a severe flight risk due to the passports I had turned over. He was charged with attempted murder, grand larceny, wire fraud, and tax evasion. The forensic accountants had a field day with the ledger. He had stolen over $12 million from clients over a decade. He pled guilty to avoid a life sentence, taking a plea deal for 25 years. He will be 75 when he gets out. I divorced him while he was awaiting trial. I took everything that wasn't seized by the government for restitution. 5 years have passed since that day. Maya is 21 now. She is a junior in college, studying forensic psychology. She wants to work with victims of domestic abuse. Her arm healed perfectly, though she still has a faint scar near her hairline, a line she calls her survival mark. We live in a smaller house now, a place with no marble floors and no locked offices. I went back to school and got my certification in archival restoration. I work for a museum now, preserving history instead of hiding it. Sometimes, when the light hits a certain way in the afternoon, I think about that moment in the ambulance, the fear, the silence, and I realize that the silence wasn't a cage, it was a chrysalis. We broke out of it, not by being quiet, but by screaming the truth so loud that the walls came down. I look at Maya, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, laughing at something on her phone, a phone she doesn't have to hide anymore. Mom? She asks, catching me staring. What is it? Nothing. I smile, taking a sip of tea, just thinking about how much I love the noise. We are safe, we are whole, and the office is closed permanently.